Good afternoon and welcome to the Detroit Future City webinar, our Lunch and Learn, on our latest report, the Detroit Reinvestment Index. We'd like to start out by thanking the Kresge Foundation for allowing this opportunity. But we are really, really excited to share with you not only this report, and the work that's come out of this report. This is sort of an unusual report for Detroit Future City. It's the only panel survey that we do where we've surveyed large businesses, small businesses, but we do this report year over year to better understand what is happening in Detroit and in the region and how we are moving forward in our and from an economic development perspective and from the business community perspective. We're so pleased to have this rich and diverse panel that will respond to the report today. And I want to just take a moment and thank the staff at the Center for Equity Engagement and Research here at DFC, led by Ashley Williams-Clark, Shari Williams, Edward Lynch, Kendall Nash, Didi Young, Adi, and one of our newest members who's just joined the team with us just this past year. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Wendy Jackson, who is the Managing Director of the Kresge Foundation for Detroit. And Wendy, would you like to give a welcome for us?
Thank you, Anika, and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to discuss the findings of the Detroit Reinvestment Index. When the Kresge Foundation began this very unique survey 5 years ago, it was with the imperative to provide Detroit with its own tool to track national and local perceptions of our city. So today, the index continues to be an important gauge of the progress our community is making toward a resurgence that includes all residents and provides equitable opportunity for economic advancement and also reflects just and fair patterns of public and private investment. Today, you're going to learn that although the report offers welcome news in its affirmation of our national business community and local entrepreneurs that continue to have confidence in the city's revitalization, the report also underscores the reality that we must continue to shore up critical areas, particularly in providing greater support to local entrepreneurs. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Ashley Williams-Clark, Vice President and the amazing Director of Detroit Future City's Center for Equity, Engagement, and Research. The center is now a permanent home for the index, and with a terrific team that Anika just introduced, but also with DFC being a terrific partner, they're producing reports that help us think differently about the possibilities ahead for our community. So thank you and welcome, Ashley.
Thank you so much, Wendy. And I'm excited to share with you all today about our newly released Detroit Reinvestment Index, a measure of Detroit's comeback. So this survey has been going on since 2016, and each year it focuses in on national business leaders and their perceptions of Detroit as a place for doing business. But we also like to really hone in each year on something that gives us a little bit more fine-grained detail. And this year, we really wanted to focus in on the needs of Metro Detroit entrepreneurs with a really special focus on local infrastructure and amenities and the role that those play in businesses' ability to thrive in Detroit. So our survey looks at two different groups. We did a survey of national business leaders. So these are senior leaders, high-level decision-making responsibility. They're at a nationwide company, and they have more than 250 employees. We also did a survey of Metro Detroit entrepreneurs. These were people over the age of 18, so adults, who've owned and operated a business for at least 18 months, employed no more than 50 employees, and who operate in the Detroit metropolitan area. And I'd like to also note that we partnered with a number of our local partners, including some who are on this call here today, to really help get the survey out and to make sure that we were getting representation from a diverse range of Metro Detroit businesses. So what did we find? In 2022, the DRI survey results show that both national business leaders and Metro Detroit entrepreneurs have increasingly favorable views of Detroit as an investment opportunity, in fact, reaching the highest in the DRI's history. So here on the left, you'll see this is what we saw from the national business leaders. Overall, in 2022, national business leaders' views of Detroit as an investment opportunity was the most positive in the DRI's history. So 82% of national business leaders had a favorable view of Detroit. And moreover, we saw an increase in the share who viewed Detroit as being an excellent opportunity for investment. Then we looked to Metro Detroit entrepreneurs. So similarly, they had positive views of Detroit, but it didn't change from 2017. That being said, we did find that there was an increase in how strongly they felt. So more entrepreneurs viewed Detroit as an excellent investment opportunity at 38% in 2022 compared to prior years. That being said, they're still slightly less optimistic than the national business leaders. One interesting piece among the national business leaders that we wanted to highlight is that we found there was a noticeably higher share of younger business owners. So these are these Gen Z and millennial business leaders that are in the dark green on the right. They had a slightly more favorable view of Detroit's current and future investment potential compared to Gen X and boomers. And we think this trend might highlight the city's recovery with younger generations who might not have as much of a memory of the city's decline and have witnessed more of Detroit's promising growth post-bankruptcy. And so when we look at Metro Detroit entrepreneurs, while we saw that their view of Detroit as an investment opportunity has kind of remained the same since the last time we asked this question, what we did see is that their entrepreneurial spirit and their commitment to Detroit are strong. Metro Detroit entrepreneurs are more likely to recommend Detroit for doing business than any time in the DRI's history. So 93% said that they would be somewhat or very likely to recommend Detroit for opening a small business. They're also committed to staying in Detroit. The majority of Metro Detroit entrepreneurs, so 97%, said that they are likely to continue operating business in Detroit for the next 3 to 5 years. So as I noted earlier, in addition to measuring overall perceptions of Detroit, we really wanted to focus in this year on the role of infrastructure and amenities, recognizing both the need to support and to make sure we're providing the things that our small businesses need in order to succeed. But we also want to be aware of the role that infrastructure and amenities play in attracting businesses and retaining them, and in light of these large national federal investments that are going to be happening in the infrastructure space. And I think also important to note is that in many ways, the reliability of a city's infrastructure and amenities, it's a reflection of the robust economic activity that's taking place. And it's also closely related to other things like supply chain services, business resources, as well as things that benefit both employees and area residents. So we thought it was really important to check in on our national and national business leaders and Metro Detroit entrepreneurs' views of infrastructure and amenities so that we could better understand their future business choices related to Detroit. So one of the key themes that emerged for our national business leaders is that quality infrastructure is key when they are looking for a city to invest in. National business leaders were asked about their preferences for, do you prioritize low cost of living or amenities when you're choosing a new location? And similar to previous years when we've asked this question, the majority of national business leaders, so 65%, said that they prefer to locate in a city with a high cost of living in exchange for lots of amenities and entertainment options for their employees. And this is actually even higher than it was when we asked previously. So it's about 12 percentage points higher than in 2019. And again, of note, preference for amenities was significantly higher among Gen Z and millennial leaders, Also for businesses with less than 1,000 employees, and those in the industrial and manufacturing, IT, telecom, and then retail, food, and restaurant sectors. We also asked the national business leaders about 22 different city features that would provide the best environment to run their businesses. And that included things like how the government functions, about neighborhood amenities, crime, infrastructure. And the top 5 things that emerged for the national business leaders were all really related to infrastructure. So this included broadband and internet access, dependable utilities, uninterrupted access to quality water, infrastructure and physical working order, and public neighborhood infrastructure and physical working order. Other things that also came up were proven ability to support residents and businesses during weather events and reliable transportation. So really, again, this theme of infrastructure, and this also showed up when we asked questions about like the role of COVID in their business decisions, and that infrastructure and talent were driving national business leaders about location. So for businesses who are looking to expand outside their current location, infrastructure was the number 2 reason, following just behind the number 1 reason, which was to increase access to quality and talent. So this really speaks to the need for cities to invest in the type of infrastructure needed to draw and retain these large national businesses. So how did Detroit fare on these things? So we asked the national business leaders to rank Detroit in each of these key city features. And what we found is that national business leaders view Detroit as a place with the infrastructure and amenities that they need to run a business. 71% of them described Detroit as being excellent or good in providing reliable public transportation and high quality public spaces for employees and area residents. 69% felt the same for Detroit's general and private neighborhood infrastructure being in physical working order. 68% for Detroit's broadband and internet access and dependable utilities, and 67% for neighborhood amenities for their employees and area residents, and then also for public neighborhood infrastructure and physical working order. Additionally, 70% of them agreed that Detroit provides access to a pipeline of qualified talent. And not only do national business leaders rate Detroit positively on key infrastructure and amenity features, but what's interesting is that their rating of Detroit has also improved since the survey was last conducted in 2019. So of the 10 attributes that we asked about in 2019, and we also asked about this year, we found that every single attribute saw an increase in the share of business leaders with positive perceptions. And one thing that we especially wanted to note was the large increase, a 20 percentage point increase of business leaders who viewed Detroit as having a clean municipal balance sheet and no major city debt, as well as a low crime rate. So while those still rank relatively lower compared to some of the other things that we asked about, we saw improvement in those perceptions. But while all of this is important, and just, we see these positive opinions of Detroit's infrastructure, it's important to note that Detroit still lags behind other cities. We asked for the survey respondents to rank Detroit in comparison to 4 other cities, and Detroit tied for being last in terms of infrastructure. And so what that really speaks to is the fact that there are still opportunities to continue to renew the city's infrastructure. If we shift over to our Metro Detroit entrepreneurs, a slightly different theme emerged in our results from them. And that is that the cost of running and operating a business is what matters most to them. So while they still cared about infrastructure, we really need to think about ways to support these small businesses and their growth. Metro Detroit entrepreneurs recognize Detroit's potential for starting small businesses. And so that piece I spoke to about, wanting more business supports shows up here. What we found is that the city's scale and growth, quality of placemaking and environment, and fewer barriers are the top 3 reasons that local entrepreneurs decided to start a business in Detroit. And when we asked about what their top necessities are from that larger list, the top 5 things that rose to the top were slightly different than the national business leaders. So unlike national counterparts, Metro Detroit entrepreneurs' business priority is really keeping the lights on, or in other words, running a business at a lower cost. So more than half of the attributes on their absolute necessity list for running a business are related to lowering business costs or having economic support. 56% believe that incentives to start a small business are completely necessary for running their businesses. Half of them chose low taxes and economic opportunities for people of all racial and ethnic backgrounds, and 47% chose a low cost of living. And while Metro Detroit entrepreneurs are primarily concerned with lowering their business costs, they still do require reliable infrastructure and amenities to succeed. So while it didn't make it into necessarily the top 5, there were many characteristics that came up. So for example, just under 47% identified reliable public transportation. And in the list here is uninterrupted access to quality water. And then similarly, when we asked about the impact of COVID on their decisions on where to locate, many of the things that came up as impacting their decisions were again related to business costs. For those who decided to stay in Detroit, it was because they wanted to stay close to their suppliers. They want to benefit from Detroit's business-friendly tax or regulatory environment, and they wanted to keep the low cost of living to reduce operating costs. And for those that said that they were looking for opportunities outside of Detroit, one of the driving factors there was choosing to relocate due to lowering the cost of living to help reduce operating costs. One of the cool things about this study too is that we were able to break this down to look at some of the responses by different types of businesses. And when we broke it down by type of business, we saw a slight reordering of the priorities. So for people of color-owned businesses, incentives to start small businesses rose to the top even more so, along with economic opportunity for people from all racial and ethnic backgrounds. And for small businesses, infrastructure like uninterrupted access to quality water, dependable utilities, and broadband internet access rose to the top. And in the report, there's more details too there about female-owned businesses as well as newly established businesses. So how does Detroit stand in providing these things? Our study found that Metro Detroit entrepreneurs value incentives to start a small business, and they believe Detroit performs well in this area. So 76% of Metro Detroit entrepreneurs describe Detroit as being excellent or good in providing incentives to start a small business and economic opportunities for people of all racial and ethnic backgrounds. And notably, they view Detroit as performing lowest on several infrastructure elements, such as dependable utilities, which came in at 66%, ability to support residents and businesses during weather events, private neighborhood infrastructure, and then also dependable stormwater management and sewerage systems. Again, similar to the survey of national business leaders, impressions of Detroit's features are improving. So of the 10 attributes that we asked in last year's survey that were asked, or in 2017, that were asked again this year, every attribute saw an increase in the share of Metro Detroit entrepreneurs with positive perceptions. And again, I would note the large increase in the share who view Detroit as having an effective local government, as well as a clean municipal balance sheet and no major city debt, both of which saw increases of over 25 percentage points. So all that being said, while rating infrastructure lower, Metro Detroit entrepreneurs did in fact recognize the improvements that have been made in Detroit while still seeing room for growth. So almost all of the entrepreneurs surveyed, so over 91%, described Detroit as a city that offers the infrastructure needed for their business's success. And nearly 4 out of 5 believe that Detroit's infrastructure is at least somewhat better than it was a decade ago. But that doesn't mean that there aren't challenges that they face. And so we asked these entrepreneurs, what are some of the challenges that you're faced, and asked them to rank based off of a list we provided. And the things that rose to the top here was that Metro Detroit lacks an adequately trained workforce, and that there are limited resources to help start a business. And this was especially so at the top of the list for our people of color owned businesses, our female businesses, and our Gen Z and millennial owned businesses. So Metro Detroit entrepreneurs, as I noted, they really face this kind of complex set of challenges to running a business. So tied to that are, what do they need to succeed? And what we found when we asked them to select their top 5 things they need to succeed based on a list, Detroit entrepreneurs said that they need connections with skilled workers, partners, and customers. They need skilled workers overall. They need access to mentorship and training opportunities, access to marketing and advertising resources, and improving the pace of revitalization and rehabilitating neighborhoods and communities. And again, we noticed some differences based off of the type of business ownership. So different Metro Detroit entrepreneur groups have slightly different targeted resources that their businesses need in order to succeed. So for instance, despite an overall 18 percentage point decrease in the need to improve the pace of revitalizing neighborhoods and communities, it does remain a higher priority for some, especially for smaller business owners. So for people of color-owned businesses, 41% saw improving the pace of revitalization as important, and 44% for small business owners. Also, all groups said that they needed access to skilled workers, but that especially elevated for people of color and female-owned businesses. Both of them ranked that fairly highly. And then also both people of color-owned businesses and small businesses, we saw aid in securing funding or raising capital also rising to the top. So to recap, the 2022 DRI shows another year of Detroit's progress in economic revitalization. National business leaders, they hope to find more reliable infrastructure. Metro Detroit entrepreneurs really concerned about the cost of running the business. They see improvements in infrastructure, but note challenges around several infrastructure elements, such as dependable utilities, ability to support residents and businesses during weather events, and private neighborhood infrastructure, and stormwater management and sewage systems. And especially for Metro Detroit small business owners, as they face an increasingly complex set of challenges, they hope to find assistance they need to start and grow their businesses. This includes more tax incentives, more access to mentorship and training opportunities, more incentives for small businesses to operate sustainably and help preserve the environment, and better networking with partners and customers. So the 2022 Detroit Reinvestment Index really sheds light on the opportunity for Detroit to continue on its path forward with its economic recovery and to make Detroit a city that can meet the needs of businesses. So with that, those are the major findings from the report. The report is available on our website. We also will have printed copies available. So Dee Dee's going to be placing a link in the chat where you can go to request a copy. They're free. We will mail them to you. So please sign up if you're interested in one, and we'll also put a link in our post-event follow-up. But with that, I'm going to introduce Shari Williams, who's our senior program manager and the brains behind this wonderful event that we're having today. And she's going to be facilitating a conversation with 3 of our guest panelists who I think are really going to bring this home for us and really share what businesses are facing on the ground, as well as what this means for our business attraction efforts. So with that, I'll hand it over to Shari.
Thank you so much, Ashley. That was a wonderful presentation. The data insights in the DRI report, it does a really great job of highlighting the needs of Metro Detroit entrepreneurs and the role that local infrastructure plays in businesses' ability to thrive in Detroit. So thank you so much for taking time to share with the audience. I hope the audience also found this presentation helpful and insightful. And as we move forward, I'm really excited to welcome our guest panelists. As we continue on in this webinar, I want the audience to know that we will dedicate some time for Q&A with you all. So if there are questions coming up for you all, as you hear the guest panelists introduce themselves and their work, feel free to plop them in the Q&A box, and we'll be happy to answer questions that come in. And if you have questions for the DFC team regarding the report, those questions are also welcome. So first, we have Charity Dean, President and CEO of the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance. We're really excited to have you, Charity. Feel free to join us on the screen. Next, we have Maureen Krauss, who is the president and CEO of Detroit Regional Partnership. And we also have Wafa Dinaro, the executive director with the New Economy Initiative. I'm so thankful to have each of you join us today and share with the audience a little bit about your work and what you all are seeing on the ground as it relates to local business development, supports, and attraction. Charity, let's start with you. Could you take a few moments to introduce yourself, your work, and any reactions you have to what you heard from the presentation today?
Awesome, thank you. So first, I want to thank you all for having me. Super excited to be here today. I am Charity Dean. I am the president and CEO of the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance. The Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance creates programs and advocates for policies that result in thriving Black-owned businesses in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County. And I come to this panel, this report from two positions. One, I run the Black Business Alliance, but I'm also a small business owner myself. I am the owner of Rosa, which is a small coffee shop in my neighborhood, Grandmont Rosedale. I think it's important to talk a little bit about what we do with the Black Business Alliance as I respond to the report. So some of the programs that we have at the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance are positioned to really respond to some of the needs that were just identified of small businesses. One of the things that we hold dear to is our mission to help close the racial wealth gap. We have a racial wealth gap in our country, in our state, and the Kellogg Foundation put out a report in 2018 called The Business Case for Racial Equity. And in that report, it said that if we were to close the racial wealth gap, that gap being white families and Black families with the same education and the same income, the white family is going to have 9 times more wealth. But if we close that gap, we could see a $92 billion increase in Michigan's economy. And it laid out several steps to do that, the last steps being around business development in underserved areas and access to capital for minority entrepreneurs. And so the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance really positions itself on those 2 points. And so we have a program called Capital Connect, which is a cohort style program, really unique hands-on approach to helping business owners create business plans, do their financial projections, get any technical assistance they need so that they can be eligible for funding, and then we connect them through that funding. Our BizWiz program is a one-stop shop. Both of those are really capital heavy, and as you saw in the report, access to resources, access to capital is a need, something that we all know. And through those programs, in the 1.5 years that the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance has been operating, we've been able to connect Black entrepreneurs to close to or over $6 million directly through those programs. And it is because of the unique hands-on approach that we have. It's because of the funding partners that we have, giving underwriting guidelines, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the barriers to capital, but having partners that say, okay, we'll let you know what the rules are to the game, and then having the Black Business Alliance say, okay, we'll make sure that we have people that are ready to meet those criteria, and then helping to facilitate a match. We do a number of other things too. But what I'll say with my limited time that I have left is one thing that is struck me in this report, one thing that is really, really important to the work that we do at the Black Business Alliance is policy. That small businesses and even national business leaders talked about the need for effective government, effective local government, especially for small businesses, incentives for government. And so I see us at the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance really pushing on our partners in government to really rethink how we invest and how we engage with small businesses. I would challenge anyone on the call to think about their local government, wherever you might be in Metro Detroit, and ask yourself, is there a director of small business in that local government? Small businesses hire 50% of folks employed in Detroit work for small business. And so we really need to rethink how we're doing local government, and it's clear through this report, but we really need to rethink how we're doing local government, how we're doing policy in a way that is not just reactive because small businesses exist, but they are really proactive in attracting small businesses, and how do we make small businesses' lives easier. So I will stop there, but I am very happy to be here and happy to get into the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Charity. Really important nuggets that you shared there, and important work that you're doing and leading. Next, let's invite Maureen to the screen to introduce yourself, your work, and any reactions you have from the presentation you heard today. You're muted.
Okay, I think I'm on and I think you can hear me. Thank you so much, Shari, and really thank you also to Anika and Wendy for really creating this study and facilitating this event today. I'm really grateful to be a part of it. I am the president and CEO of the Detroit Regional Partnership. We represent the 5.5 million population Detroit region, but Detroit is always our calling card. We work on attracting new investment to our area, new jobs and investment, really from around the world. So our partners have gotten together to understand that when we combine our assets and work together, we're so much more impactful. We have 3 pillars: market, grow, and support the region. So marketing is really the part of our work where we are telling our story around the world. I personally believe that Detroit let everyone else tell our story for a long time, but now we really own the story. We're at a terrific moment in time. I'll talk more about that later related to the study, but we're at a great moment in time where we have the ability and there's interest in what our story really is. And the data provided gives me all the great talking points that I need as we do that as an organization. Grow is job creation and investment. We have developed some very strict metrics that we are judged by every year on the work that we do for jobs, pathway jobs, and investment. And those are important for us to track and to help guide us as we look at jobs for all. You know, we believe, and this really goes back to the small business entrepreneurship part of the study, every job is important to the person who has it. So it's very important for us to be thoughtful about the jobs that are coming in and matching them up with the talent that we have here. Once again, I'll spend a little more time on that in a minute on talent. And then finally, support the region. You know, all of our local economic development partners, our local communities, they cannot afford to go out and buy databases about talent or research about the mobility industry and how it impacts them. But once again, our combination, our investors bringing all of these resources together allow us to serve that whole wider region, the city and the region, with resources that they couldn't afford on their own. So those are our 3 tenets of the work that we do. I will say that I'm super excited about this study. So part of my job as CEO is to work with our team as we speak to audiences and individual businesses around the world. I've been doing this for many years, and I will say historically, you know, and I've worked with the city and the region through bankruptcy and the implosion of the auto industry. And it seemed like so many meetings started out with sort of a sad, oh yeah, what's happening in Detroit? How is it going? In that tone. Now I'm super excited to say that these meetings are really have a change in tone with them. 2 weeks ago, we had over 400 influencers in town from the Industrial Asset Management Council. They are the organizations that and individuals that really establish where projects are going to go, where new industrial facilities are going to go. We had over 400 of them in town to show off the area for 5 days. It was the most spectacular weather that you could offer, but they were able to see and feel for themselves what's happening there. I love to tell the story to people. I love to bring people here. If I had an unlimited budget, I would bring everyone here to see for themselves, but we had them here for 5 days. And we've already, the results is we've already have 2 projects that people are talking to us about. We have exposed people to, you know, what's happening in our city, what dynamics are occurring here. So just, you know, a little bit of reaction on the study. So I was struck by the increase in really a short amount of time on perceptions and feelings, both of the national business leaders and of the entrepreneurs and small businesses. Those are huge numbers. When you're looking at 10 to 20% bumps up in a short amount of time, good job, Detroit, right? I mean, it's just terrific how that work, that hard work that gets done always sort of below the surface, because we're always working to make things better here. It has been noticed. And sometimes I think we don't take enough time to reflect on that, that things are really getting better. We always have things to improve. It's like when you have a house and you lose sight of the fact that you may have painted the outside of it, but you still have to do the shrubs. We have to think about the positives sometimes and really talk about those more. So I loved seeing the improvement on a lot of those key categories. One thing to be concerned about is the talent issue. It's big. We have a talent solutions team. Sarah Gregory from our team is on the call. She leads that team. And it really is to make sure that job opportunities are matched up with talent. And, we have some really terrific talent programs in the city and in the region and in the state. But sometimes our customer, the businesses, doesn't know how to access those. So that's really the job of Sarah and her team to do that. So talent is something we need to be aware of. But I will tell you about talent. We have experienced talent in this region. We have talent that is willing to work hard, that has lower turnover rates than our competitor states. We just need to make sure they have the skills for the future. So one last thing I will say about the study and the support for entrepreneurs, and it's just so terrific to hear Charity talk about the work she's doing. It is super important. We recently were awarded an EDA Build Back Better challenge from the federal government to help to accelerate. It's called the Global Epicenter of Mobility, and it really is to help support entrepreneurs, small and medium-sized businesses, and talent under the mobility umbrella to ensure that they have the skills, the right data, the right knowledge of where our economy in specifically automotive is going right now, so they don't get left behind. So they have access to the support, support organizations, support testing facilities, support data, and the right talent that we already know we have in this region. So we're very excited about that work that you're going to be hearing a lot more about. And many of you on the call have been partners with us, and we're very grateful for that. But I think, before I wrap up, I will say I have about 3 or 4 big presentations coming up to groups. One's at the University of Michigan this Friday. I'll be doing a trade mission to Italy soon to talk about companies, about investing here. Potentially one in Washington, D.C. in front of Congress to talk about, regional innovation, and they're interested in hearing from Detroit. I love when I can have that opportunity to talk about our region. The data that you provide gives me that really, makes my talking points valid. So I'm very excited about it. Also helps us identify the things that we still need to work on. Like I said, I'm not thinking that, well, we've solved all our problems, time to go home. It's not true. But I will say one thing about our region that is very strong is that we identify those problems and we work very hard to make sure that they are solved for all. As I said, one last thing, I said every job's important to the person who has it. So how does our work impact small businesses and entrepreneurs? When you bring in 100 jobs to an area and say a $10 million investment, that creates more customers for that small business, for that entrepreneur who has a new innovative product that a new company will embrace. So it really is it's not an either or thing. It's the full cycle of how we help create new customers and a stronger environment for our entrepreneurs and our small and medium-sized businesses, and in the end, for all of our residents and families. So with that, Shari, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Exciting things happening over at DRP, and thank you for sharing. Wafa, I welcome you to the screen. We'd love to hear more from you and the work happening over there in EI.
Thank you so much, Shari, and thank you, Anika and Wendy, for putting this together. We're really excited about the work that DFC does, and really the data that they pull together that really helps drive some of the decision making and the direction for organizations like the New Economy Initiative. So NEI is a philanthropy-led entrepreneurship development strategy that's really working to build an inclusive network of support for small businesses. We believe that the next big Fortune 500 company is a entrepreneur that's has an idea, that's already has a small business, and we want to make sure that they have the access to resources to either start their business or grow their business. We are a big believer in this region. We think we have the innovation. We know we have the business owners here, and we want to make sure that they have access to resources to be able to thrive and reach their full potential. We have been around since 2007. Initially, the idea behind the New Economy Initiative was to really be able to have a more high-tech, high-growth industry in Southeast Michigan. And as we've done the work, and we've looked at how do we diversify our economy, we've really kind of settled in on our current mission, which is to grow an inclusive culture of entrepreneurship in Southeast Michigan, to really support business owners of color, to really support women business owners and make sure they have access to capital, access to resources, access to technical assistance to be able to grow and thrive. As we've heard from everybody who's spoken before me, we know that small businesses play a critical role in job creation. In fact, Charity mentioned that 50% of jobs are from small businesses. We know they're incredibly important to our economy, and we want to continue to build an inclusive network of support. So I keep talking about an inclusive network of support, and I really want to talk to you a little bit about how we do that. We do that in two different ways. One, we are big believers in advocating for good policy, advocating for streamlining of procurement processes, permitting processes, making sure that small businesses are able to access government contracts without all of the red tape that sometimes comes with it. We also are building what we call a small business ecosystem, where we grant money to business support organizations, capital providers, as well as trusted connectors to really have a robust small business support ecosystem. So a small business can go to any of these organizations that we support and get A through Z help and support to be able to start, get accounting help, get legal services, and be able to grow and scale their businesses. We heard in some of the Detroit Reinvestment Index data that there's a lot of challenges facing small businesses. We recognize that the most recent data shows that Detroit across the country has fared much worse with small business closures post-COVID than the rest of the country. And we're really looking to close some of those disparities and address some of those gaps. We know that it's communities of color that are more impacted when it comes to small business closures. And we're really looking to provide them support and resources to be able to address some of their issues, which our belief is that somebody who can bake cupcakes can make a really good, like red velvet cupcake. They might be able to do that really well, but they might not know how to do the accounting. They might not know how to scale their business. We want to provide them the resources and make it easy for them to go get help to be able to scale their business and be able to package those cupcakes and ship them and get them into Meijer or Kroger and be able to scale. Again, we think that the next big business, the next Ford Motor Company, is that the person who is behind those is already here. We just need to really arm them with the resources to be able to reach their full capacity and fully launch their business. We're continuing this work. Really, our goal is to create a sustainable, inclusive business support ecosystem and continue to work through that and really work ourselves out of a job once we have a fully sustainable, supportive ecosystem. And we're going to continue to do that work to make sure we're addressing some of these small businesses. And really, we want to be able to provide the support to Black and Brown business owners because they are the most underserved. They are historically the ones who don't receive as much, don't have access to the resources that other business owners do. Shari, I think I've reached my time limit.
Thank you so much, Wafa. Incredible work that you are doing and leading with the New Economy Initiative. I welcome all of our guest panelists to the screen, and I welcome the audience to ask any questions that you have. We have a few minutes dedicated for Q&A with the audience. The one question that I have here, I can't tell if this one has been answered yet, but Ashley, this one is for you. Is there any data showing how many Detroit entrepreneurs are Detroit residents?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. We didn't have that as part of this report, but we did ask about client base region, and of the respondents in the survey, 55% had a client base in or near Detroit, 39% were in or near Michigan, and 6% were kind of broader Midwest or national. The other panelists might have more specific detail on Detroit residents, but we asked more about kind of where their customer base was.
Well, thank you, Ashley. I also have a question here. As you each reflect on the work that you do, what could folks on this call, the audience members, folks in the ecosystem, what could everyone do to galvanize around equitably moving things forward for local businesses in Detroit? And this question is for anyone that wants to jump in.
You know, we recently engaged in some policy advocacy around a proposed ordinance in the city of Detroit with City Council. The ordinance had great intentions, but we saw it as something that would negatively impact small businesses. And I think I know, because I spent the last 7 years working in city government, it really was the first time, at least that I've seen, where there was almost this support or this coalition of folks speaking up very loudly on behalf of small businesses to city government, not being encouraged by the administration to do so, not being encouraged by other city council people to do so, but it was really, oh, this is happening. And then there was this groundswell of resistance, and we prevailed in that. And I think that's important to note, because there are so many decisions that are made at the local level that impact small businesses, and we just are not at the table. We're finding out about, we found out about that ordinance from Facebook, right? No one called and said, we're about to do this, this will impact small businesses. And so one of the things that I would, if I could take a little time here to suggest, obviously support small businesses, but that's not going to change infrastructure, right? We need loud, obnoxious policy that look at small businesses in the same way that we look at corporations. And why do I say that? When we think about what we do in Ferndale or in Detroit or in Taylor or in Oakland County or Wayne County, when we look at what we do as a governmental entity to attract a corporation, man, we get so creative. Everything is off the table. We don't say we can't. We say, how do we make this happen? what rules need to change in order to make this happen. Imagine if that level of passion and vigor was to say, how do we attract more small businesses and how do we make it super easy for small businesses to thrive? And unfortunately, because small businesses do not have the level of advocacy, they're not paying for folks to spend time at City Hall on their behalf. Small businesses need every person that's on this call, not only supporting them, that's one for sure, but like we need to be challenging our elected officials to really rethink how we do what we talk about when we're talking about economic development. And if small businesses is not a cornerstone of that, then we need to push back on that, because small businesses are how you get a thriving commercial corridor in any city is investment in small business, right? How you get workforce development, small business. And so we really need to transform the ways in which we look at small businesses as drivers of economic development in our region. And from a policy perspective specifically.
Love that. Love that, Charity. Thank you. Maureen, I see you came off mute.
Yeah, I just wanted to support a little bit, well, everything that Charity said, but give a little bit of a spin to it. Part of what we did with our EDA grant is to make sure that access was made available to historically excluded communities on things like testing and data and research and all of the things that might be out there, but might be tucked away in various spots of the region. So that's one of our primary goals that we're working on. When you think about it, it's important to remember that we have a history of success in this area. And I use this example all the time for first-time visitors to the city. Detroit doesn't have a lot of chain restaurants in it, right? For whatever reason, the chains have ignored us for many years. What it has created is a culture of success for entrepreneurs, for very locally homegrown restaurants, culturally diverse restaurants that is very unique and has been very successful. And outsiders always notice that when they come to visit. There's not a TGI Fridays on every corner. I'm not picking on them, but there really isn't. But that's a good thing. So when you think about the fact that, we're kind of scrappy around here, right? But okay, we don't get a TGI Fridays on every corner, but we have to eat. And I think that has made a really unique environment in the food scene, right? But I think we need to take that whole thought process and that sort of drive that we have and really embrace that in these other businesses. So I am, excited to, in our little piece of this, to really help provide that access to resources that we have here for the small businesses, for the entrepreneurs, and would encourage others to, one, let us know you're out there. If you run a talent program that only helps 10 people a year, that's terrific. That's 10 people who got some help that they needed. We just have to gain that awareness and communicate those resources that are out there. And then we find the true gaps of what's missing.
Really great points, Maureen. Thank you so much. Before I go on to the next question, Wafa, was there anything you wanted to add or?
I think Maureen and Charity did a good job covering it. I think the easiest thing to do is to actually go and support micro businesses, to go and shop there. The holidays are coming up. Go get your cup of coffee from the local coffee shop. Go buy and support BIPOC owned small businesses.
Yeah.
And Charities group, MDBBA, they have a great Black owned directory where you can go and look up Black owned businesses and support those businesses.
Beautiful. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you each. So the next question I have is, how did quality public schools and universities factor in the survey? Ashley, you want to take that one?
Yeah, great question. So we didn't ask about public school education, but we did ask about proximity to universities and colleges. And so for both national business leaders and for entrepreneurs, it showed up as a lower priority, but they both thought relatively highly of it. So national business leaders gave Detroit reviewed Detroit as having a good or excellent rating for proximity to top colleges and universities, so 66% compared to 75% of Metro Detroit entrepreneurs who had a positive view of Detroit's proximity to top colleges. But that being said, I think where education does show up, maybe and not as direct of like a response, is in the share of especially Detroit entrepreneurs who said access to a skilled workforce is important to them, right? Our education system produces our future workforce. And so if there are challenges that are being seen in terms of that access to a skilled workforce, I think that certainly says that there is value and importance in engaging with our educational system and improving our educational outcomes to support that future workforce.
Great, thank you so much, Ashley. So I think I have two more questions actually, and I think I have exactly enough time for these two questions. So if anyone else adds a question, it's possible I may not be able to get to it. This one though is a comment and a question that has come in. It says, on closing the wealth gap, I lived in Ferndale for a year, renting while shopping for my forever home, which I found in Rosedale Park. My fixed cost of living went up 60% moving back to Detroit from 4 blocks north of the Meyer on 8 Mile to Rosedale Park. Small business owners are hammered with auto insurance, home insurance, and city income tax. Regional commuting patterns and city home sales tell the story of impact clearly. How do we compete for significant small business growth when the cost disparities are so intense? And what are your orgs doing to fix this systems level inequity? It's a great question. Thank you.
Yeah, so hi neighbor, I'm in Grandmont and my coffee shop is in North Rosedale. You know, I think it goes back to advocating for policies that are thinking about these things from small businesses. One of the things that we're going to be doing next year at the Metro Detroit Black Business Alliance on the policy side is advocating for a director of small business in the mayor's office. We think that your point is valid and true, and that not only impacts small businesses, but home ownership and where people are choosing to live and send their kids, absolutely. But from a small business perspective, if you are not thinking about these things, and specifically if you're not thinking about small business attraction and retention, and you're only responding to small business complaints, then you'll never catch up. And so what we need, and this is not just Detroit, I'm not just going in on Detroit. What we need at every local level and in every county is you need someone with authority and power that is thinking strategically about small businesses and small business attraction and retention. A lot of times folks will say, oh, we've got a small business person. And what that means is maybe you are, responding to complaints about permitting or something like that. But what I'm talking about is really having a strategic plan for small business attraction and retention. And I promise you this, the way that equity works is that when you're thinking about a policy change, or when you're thinking about something from the lens of the least of these, it impacts everything else. If you start thinking about how we run our city and how we run our county for small businesses, what do we need to change to attract more small businesses and more and retain them, it will have impacts on your workforce development. It's going to have impacts on your commercial corridor. It will absolutely transform some of the other things that are on the list. But I think we have to start with small business attraction and retention. And when you do that, you start looking at these policies that make it hard for small businesses to come and start and also to stay.
So I just want to say quickly, Charity is absolutely correct. Retention is the foundation of economic development, whether it's 1 job or 100 jobs. If we don't listen to our customer, the small business, why are they successful and what are their challenges, we're not making smart policy. So that starts with retention.
Definitely. So we are at time, but I am going to just throw this question out because I think it's a quick one. Are any of the panelists aware of the responsible contracting ordinance being considered by City Council and working to ensure the implications on small businesses are being evaluated and that small businesses are aware of it? anyone can speak to that quickly.
We are aware of it. That's all I got for now. We're aware of it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been an incredible conversation. The DRI report lists the importance of programs and initiatives that puts equity and justice at the forefront and sheds light on the opportunity for Detroit to continue on this path with economic recovery in mind and make Detroit a city that meets the needs of businesses. As we conclude this webinar, I thank you each for taking time with us today, our amazing panelists, the amazing DFC team that pulled this all together, including the report, and you all, the audience, for being here with us. Please help us to continuously improve our engagement events by providing feedback on today's event with the survey that is being placed, a link in the chat. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us at info@DetroitFutureCity.com. Again, I just want to thank you all for your time today and have a wonderful rest of your day.